What's up, Photography Mafia? Photoshop is the most powerful media editor. It's used for photo retouching, graphic design including 3D models. You can even edit videos with Photoshop. In this tutorial, I'll show you the Photoshop tools that actually matter for photographers, so you can take your photos from good to epic without wasting hours on stuff you'll never use. Let's get started. When you first open Photoshop, the welcome screen will look something like this. As Photoshop continues to get updates, the interface may change, including the welcome screen. But for now, we'll open a new file or create a new file. And we can do that by going to File, New, or just clicking on New File right here. And Photoshop has several presets, but since this is a photography tutorial, we'll just click on this default Photoshop size, which shows a 7x5 inches canvas size or preset. We can change the orientation. We can change it from inches to pixels. Usually I like working with pixels. And we'll leave the color mode at RGB at 8 bits per channel. And the sRGB color profile, it works pretty well for print as well as online media. So we'll just keep it on that. And then we'll click on Create. So right now we have a blank background. So we can see this background layer here. I can click on this to hide it, but it doesn't work. I need to unlock the layer. And now I can click on the eye icon to hide this white background layer. And these are just transparent pixels that you see here, but let me activate this layer again. And we'll discuss layers a little bit more in detail as we go through this course. And on the left hand side is the tools panel. On the top is the application bar. And here are the regular panels, but pretty much everything around the background layer or this canvas here are just tools. Tools everywhere in Photoshop. And we'll be covering the main tools that you'll need to edit photos in Photoshop. The one thing about the interface in Photoshop is you can move around some of these panels, actually a lot of these panels. So for example, this properties panel, I can move it here or I can move it down here. And if I go to window, there's different workspaces. So right now we're in the essentials default workspace. So I'll just click on that again. Let me just double check and reset the essentials actually. So this is the essentials workspace, but we're going to work with the photography workspace here, which I think will be better suited for us, since Adobe likes to make their workspaces or interfaces more intuitive depending on what type of editing you're doing. So we'll just stick with the photography workspace for this tutorial. And now you can see it went to this paths panel. Let me just go back to this layers panel, which is usually where I like staying at. And right now there's no photo in this image, but I do want to show you something really quick. I'm going to create a new layer called a text layer. So I'm going to click on this icon here, the T icon or the keyboard shortcut T, to activate the type tool. And I'm just going to click right here. There's already a default color of orange selected. And then I'm just going to highlight or double click on this text and just type in Photoshop tutorial. And then I'll click on accept. And now you can see this Photoshop tutorial layer has been created. I can hide this layer by clicking on this eye icon, or I can show it again by clicking on the eye icon again. I can also change the color of the text. I can change the color, the hue, and the brightness, just like that. And while I still have this layer selected, I can change the size of the text, let's say to 300. And I can also move my mouse over the text icon here. Then you see the double-sided arrow, and then I can click, hold, and drag to change the size. Now, the one issue here is you can see it's not centered correctly, the Photoshop tutorial text here. So the main tool or the main cursor tool that you will be using is the Move tool, which is usually the default that it's on. It's also common in Adobe Premiere Pro and Adobe Illustrator. So I'm just going to click on that. And now you can see it's already selected. There's this overlay that's going around the text, and then I can just move it around And then you can also see these guides that are coming up on the screen to help me center. So let me just try to get it close. So now it's centered on the horizontal axis. And now if I move it up and down, I can almost get it centered on the horizontal and vertical, just like that. I think that's good enough for now. So now I have this selected. That looks good. Let me go back to the text layer here. And then I could just increase the size just like that. Or I should say the text, the icon or the text tool. And that's just pretty much the basics of the interface. There's a lot of tools here. We'll cover some of the main ones for photo editing. And as you can see, one of the main tools with Photoshop is the layers, which we'll cover a little bit more in detail. In the previous chapter, we created a new file and a text layer, but now we're going to work with a photo. We can open a photo by going to File, Open, or we can just drag in a photo into Photoshop. So I already have a JPEG photo that's been edited. It's an Amazonian mutt, and you can still see it's a JPEG photo. One thing we can do with this photo is we can change the saturation or the hue by adding a hue saturation layer. So I'm just going to click on this, and here's the hue saturation layer, and here's the properties panel to adjust the hue or the saturation. This photo is already edited, so I don't really need to make any adjustments, but this is just for demonstration purposes. So I'll move the hue slightly to the left and maybe change it to about -26. And now here's the layer, and I can hide the layer by clicking on the eye icon. So this is the before and this is the after. I can also rename the layer by just double clicking on it and then changing it to whatever I want. So I'll just call it hue layer. Now if I want to save this image, there's a few options I can do. I can go to File, Save, or Save As. So you can see the keyboard shortcuts. For Windows, it will be Command or actually Control plus S or Control plus Shift plus S. So if I go to save, since I didn't save this photo initially, it'll be acting like the Save As option. So I'll just click on that. And what Photoshop does is it'll allow you to save the file as a PSD file, as a Photoshop document file. And the reason why it does that is it'll give you the opportunity to save the layers. So in the future, if you want to adjust the layers, you'll be able to do that by saving and then reopening a Photoshop document file. So just keep that in mind how the Photoshop document file works. It saves layers information. The file can get very big if you start creating many layers, but I'm just going to click on cancel. If I want to save this photo as a JPEG, the option that I usually use is go to File, Export, and then click on Save for Web Legacy. Usually I just use the keyboard shortcut, which is Command Option Shift plus S or Control plus Alt plus Shift plus S on Windows, I believe. So I'll just click on this and then it'll give you the different options to save this file. I usually just keep it as JPEG, keep the quality at 100%, and then I resize it if I want. There's also different options if you're doing graphic design and you want to change it to a PNG file. So this is the 100% view, and maybe there's a fit in view screen like that. And then I would just click on save. But I'm just going to click on cancel here because I don't want to save this file. So that's one way to open a photo and save it in Photoshop. The other common way is if you have Lightroom integrated with Photoshop, which most people do, is by going to Lightroom Classic. And let's say with this file here, this photo is already edited in Lightroom, but if I wanted to make further edits or advanced adjustments in Photoshop, I can right click on the thumbnail, go to Edit In, and then I can click on Edit in Adobe Photoshop. So then it'll open up in Photoshop, and here it is. So it's saved as an image DNG file. So this is a raw file. And let's say I want to do something funny to this photo by, let's say, going to the curves tool and then increasing the midtones. Watch what happens when I save this photo. So I'll just go to save or Command S or Control S. And now it's saving right here. And it saved the file as a TIFF file. So a TIFF file also saves layer information such as this curves layer. So if I go back to Lightroom Classic, you can see it added this file here, this TIFF file that you can see right here. So this is the file that I just edited in Photoshop. This is one of 3, 2 or 3. So it's stacking some of these similar file names, but this is the photo. So the thumbnail didn't generate properly, but now it has. So Lightroom Classic automatically creates a TIFF file when you export a photo into Photoshop and re-import it. You can change the file to a PSD file in the Lightroom Classic options, but TIFF files work. So just keep that in mind when you're importing and then exporting a file back into Lightroom. The other thing is if you don't use Lightroom or Lightroom Classic, that's fine. It's not a big deal. You can still use other photography software. Some photography software also have Photoshop plugins to export into Photoshop and then re-import it back into the native photography software we're working with. We opened a JPEG photo in Photoshop as well as a RAW photo via Lightroom Classic. But what happens when we open a RAW photo directly in Photoshop? So that's what we're going to do right now. So with this RAW photo, I can drag it into Photoshop, or I can right click on it, go to Open With, and I can go to Open with Adobe Photoshop. And now what we see is the Camera Raw interface instead of Photoshop. So what's happening here? So an important concept to understand about Photoshop is that it's not a RAW processor, or it can't render RAW photos. It's a pixel-based or raster-based image editor. And in this case, Photoshop needs to use Camera Raw to render the photo or to render a RAW file. Camera Raw is also the same engine behind Lightroom Classic and Lightroom. So if you're familiar with Lightroom and Lightroom Classic, Camera Raw is pretty straightforward to use. But if you're familiar with other photography software such as Capture One, DxO Photolab, or On1 Photo Raw, it'll be pretty straightforward to use. Keep in mind, this is not a Camera Raw tutorial. So I'm just going to quickly edit this photo and open it in Photoshop. So I'm just going to zoom in here. And then I'm in the details section right now. And I'm going to click on raw details, which is slightly improve the photo, but it might be negligible. And we can notice the noise. So I'll click on denoise, which will take a few seconds to process, but it'll do a pretty good job. Now we can see a noticeable reduction in noise. And we can also tell by this photo here that it's underexposed, and we can also tell by the histogram. By the way, I have several tutorials on histograms on my channel, but I'm going to recover some of these shadows due to the underexposure, and I'm going to just move the shadow slider to the right. So we were able to recover the shadows, but we've introduced some visible noise. So I'm going to go to the detail section again, and I'm going to increase denoise to about 85. That looks good. I'm going to increase the sharpening as well to about 86. And just to make sure I don't sharpen the noise, I'm going to increase or move the masking slider to the right. I'll hold the Option or Alt key so I can see where the mask is being applied, and then drag the masking slider. So the mask will be applied to the white area. So the white area will be sharpened, and we'll talk about masks more in detail later on. So I think that looks good. Let me zoom out. Let's see the before and after, before and after. So we were able to cover a lot of the information, including some of the exposure, and recover some of the shadows using Camera Raw. And now I can open the photo in Photoshop, or I can click on Done. If I click on Done, it'll close Camera Raw and it won't open in Photoshop, but it will save the information in a meta file in the background on your computer in case you decide to open this raw photo in the future. But I'll just click on open. And now we have this photo ready to edit in Photoshop. We're going to quickly learn how to crop a photo in Photoshop. We can activate the crop tool by clicking on this icon here or pressing the keyboard shortcut C. And now you can see this overlay or this outline that's coming up. And then I can click, hold, and drag one of the corners to change the crop. And you can also see this overlay, the rule of thirds overlay or grid or guide. And we can change that by going right here and changing it to a different guide if we want. I'm just going to go back to the rule of thirds. And this crop is freeform right now, so I can just crop the way I want. If I want to reposition the photo, I can click on the photo and then just move it around. If I want a specific ratio, I can type in a specific aspect ratio here or clear it. And I can also choose one of the presets. So I can go to 16:9 and I'll just choose that. One thing to keep in mind is the delete cropped pixels. So when you crop an image, Photoshop will retain the pixels that were cropped away if this is unchecked. So I usually recommend keeping this unchecked in case you decide to later on change your crop. And one other thing about this crop is the horizon here. So we need to correct the horizon. So I can move my mouse to the corner or outside of the crop outline. And then you'll see the double arrow that's kind of like turning. So I can click, hold, and drag, and I can change the rotation just like that. Or I can click on the straighten tool right here. And then I can click, hold, and drag a line to level the horizon. So I think this crop is good for now. And I'll just press enter to accept it, or I can press this check mark to accept it. Now what I'm going to do is undo this crop or revert this image back to its original state before any type of saving. I can press the keyboard shortcut F12, or I can go to File, and then I can go to Revert. So this goes back to the original state of the photo, and I'm going to press Command 0 or Control 0 to center or fit view this image. What I'm going to do this time to this image instead is expand it. You may have noticed this contextual taskbar that's in the bottom. This helps a lot with a lot of the AI features of Photoshop. I won't be doing a lot of AI prompts or tools regarding the contextual taskbar, but if you don't see the contextual taskbar, you can go to Window, and it's available right here, the contextual taskbar. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom out of this image. So I'm pressing the keyboard shortcut Command plus spacebar, then you'll see the magnifying glass, and then you can click, hold, and drag. So Command plus spacebar or Control plus spacebar to zoom out. Alternatively, if you want to zoom out of a photo, you can use the scroll wheel on the mouse if your mouse has a scroll wheel. You do need to activate or turn on that option sometimes. So you can go to Photoshop and then go to Settings, go to Tools, and then you can click on Zoom with Scroll Wheel. So that's a good option to have. And you can also see the hand icon here. The hand icon kind of like moves around the image on the canvas. To activate that, you can click on this icon here or press the keyboard shortcut H to move it around, to move the image or the panel around, I should say, or the canvas around, or you can press and hold the keyboard shortcut H to move it around. So anyways, I'm going to press Command plus spacebar, and then I'm going to click, hold, and drag to the left to zoom out, or I can move to the right to zoom in. But I'm going to zoom out because I want to show you the generative expand option here. So before I do the generative expand, I'm going to click on the straighten tool right here, and then I'm going to straighten the image. And now I'm going to expand the sides just like that. And then I'm going to click on generative expand. And for the prompt, it says, what would you like to generate? For the generative expand, I just click on generate. I don't put a prompt in. And if you do have an image and let's say you want to put birds in the sky or something, then you can start like typing in something, and then you can put a AI generated image or art into the photo. I don't want to go too much into generative AI prompts, so it's not something I'm going to be covering in this course, but I'm just going to click on generate, and then we'll see what Photoshop does. It's going to generate 3 variations right here. Keep in mind, this does take credits out of your AI cloud credits from Adobe, so make sure to pay attention to your Adobe Creative Cloud account so you don't waste or overuse Gen AI credits. So this looks good. Let me just zoom out a little and then move it here. Actually, I'll zoom back in. So you can see some dead pixels or transparent pixels here. That's fine. But I can cycle through these prompts or through these Gen AI renders that Photoshop did. They all look pretty good. And then I can just leave them at one of them if I want. I think I'll just keep it at this one for now. If I like zoom in and analyze the photo, I might see something weird and I may have to clean it up or change it. But I think that looks fine. And if I zoom in here, okay, yeah, so there's no transparent pixels. It had to do with the preview, so that looks good. And one other thing about this Gen AI Expand is it creates a layer. So it creates a layer with a mask and it draws an image around the original image. So this is the original image, and these transparent pixels or this transparent area is where Photoshop rendered the Gen AI to expand the image. So that's how you crop an image in Photoshop, as well as use the Gen Expand to expand an image. I'm going to turn off the contextual taskbar for now because I don't need it. It's a little bit distracting. I'll bring it back up later on this tutorial if I do need it, but I'll just keep it off for now. This image of a sea lion that I photographed in the Galapagos Islands, it's already been edited through Camera Raw. But we're going to clean it up a little bit, remove some of the distractions. So 2 things I want to remove are the rope here and the rope here as well. So before I get started, what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this background or initial layer here. I can do that by right clicking with my mouse on the layer and go to duplicate layer, or I can click, hold and drag it to this plus icon right there, or I can use the keyboard shortcut Command J or Control J to duplicate the layer. So you can see I have 2 or an extra layer now, so I'm just going to delete one of these layers by clicking, holding and dragging it to the garbage icon right there. So I got the background layer selected. So usually when you're manipulating an image and you're making adjustments to the pixel, sometimes it's better to duplicate the layer in case you want to revert back to the original layer or original photo without resetting everything, or using the Control Z or Command Z of undoing certain edits in a certain order. Anyways, the retouching tools are right here. There's the spot healing brush tool, the remove tool, the healing brush tool, and there's a few more tools to correct or improve a photo. These tools have the keyboard shortcut of J, and if you want to cycle through them, you can press Shift plus J to cycle through the cleanup tools and so forth. So the first thing I'm going to do is maybe use the spot healing brush tool. So it says remove marks and blemishes. So these are pretty good for dust spots or rain spots on a lens. You can also use them to remove blemishes on someone's face, such as acne. For this scenario, even though this is for spots or to remove blemishes, I can still use it for the rope here. So I'm going to zoom in here, and I'm zooming in by using the keyboard shortcut Command plus spacebar or Control plus spacebar. And you can see the size of the brush here that I have selected. I can change the size of the brush by going here, and I can change the hardness. So the hardness is the transition or the feather of the brush. So I'm going to keep the hardness at 100, and we'll take a look at how it looks when I clean this up. And I can also use the keyboard shortcut, the left or right square brackets, to change the size of the brush. So I think I'll just keep it like this, and I'm gonna leave it on sample all layers. Usually when you leave it on sample all layers, it'll check to see if it can find or generate pixels by using some of the layers below. And usually you want to keep it at content aware and the blend mode as normal. We'll discuss blend modes a little bit later on, but usually content aware is the best match for cleaning up an image. So I'm just going to brush or paint over this by clicking, holding, and dragging. And I think I'll keep it at that. So I think that looks pretty good. And you can notice if we zoom in, actually it did a really good job. You can't notice the transition. And remember, I kept the hardness at 100%. So I think that did a good job. Now I'm going to go to this rope right here. And instead of using the remove tool or the spot healing brush tool, I'll go to the remove tool. And I'm going to leave it on sample all layers and the mode as auto. So it may use generative AI. There's also this option, remove wires and cables or people, but we don't need it in this case. And I'm going to decrease the size of the brush by pressing left square bracket. And then I'm just going to paint over this just like that. And we'll see how it does with this. So this needs internet connection, so it may take a cloud credit to clean up. And that did a pretty good job. So let's zoom out of the image by pressing Ctrl 0 or Command 0 and put it in fit view. And I'm going to hide the cleanup layer. So this is the before and this is the after. This is the before and this is the after. So you can still see there's a lot of like bubbles or debris in the water. We can clean that up too individually using the spot healing brush tool, but I think now you guys got the hang of it on how to use this tool to clean up an image. We previously had a glance at layers. Right now we'll take a closer look. So here I have the background layer, and these are the adjustment layers. This photo hasn't been edited other than opening this raw file through Camera Raw. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a few adjustments. I think this photo actually looks pretty good coming right out of the camera, but I think I can do a little bit better. So the first thing I'm going to do is add the curves layer right here. So the curves layer has been added. And if you're not familiar with the curves tool, I have several tutorials on them in my channel, so make sure to look that up. But I'm going to decrease the shadows or darken it and brighten the highlights. And now we added some contrast as well as a little bit of saturation to this. I think I want to decrease the highlights a little bit and brighten up the shadows a little bit more. So I'll make this S curve a little bit more subtle. I can change this properties panel to make it a little bit bigger, just like that. So I think that looks good. So let's take a look at the before and after. The before and after. And automatically this curves layer adds a mask. We'll discuss masking shortly, but right now nothing is being masked. As you can see, this mask is completely white, so everything is revealed that's adjusted in this curves layer. And to open up the properties panel, I can just double click on the curves layer just like that and it'll open it up. Sometimes depending on your workspace, you might see the properties panel somewhere here, but remember we're in the photography workspace right here. Okay, so right now this photo looks a little bit better, but I think I want to add a little bit more color to this. So I think what I can do is maybe go to the color balance and make it a little bit more yellow on the midtone. So I'm in the midtones right now. I'll make it a little bit more yellow. like that. And then I'll go to, let's say, the highlights, and I'll put it a little bit more magenta, just like that. And maybe these shadows, I'll make it a little bit more cyan. So I'm just adding my own little touch or look to this image. Let's see before the color balance. This is before, and this is after. Before and after. And we can deactivate the curves layer and only keep the color balance layer active. So I'll deactivate the curves layer, and this is how it looks. It has a more filmic look without the curves contrast layer. So this is one of the things that makes Photoshop really powerful, like the ability to add adjustment layers and then stack them, and then you can also hide them or show them by clicking on the eye icon. I can also rearrange these layers, which isn't too much of a big deal in this case. So I move the curves layer to the top, and let's see if it makes any adjustment or difference. So it doesn't make a difference. So it looks like there are linear adjustments when I'm stacking these color balance and curves adjustment layers. And what else could we do? Maybe we can go to the hue saturation, and you can see it added it between the curves and color balance, probably because I had the curves tool selected, or the curves adjustment layer. But I'll move the hue saturation layer to the top, double click on it. Let's increase the saturation, let's say to 15, and then we can slightly change the hue to about, let's say, -5. So let's see before and after with the hue saturation layer. So these are just basic adjustments with the layers and the adjustment properties that we use. It gets more complex when we start adding different graphics or images into the photo, and then we start selecting which layer to apply to which other layer below. For example, I'm going to go and put in a Photoshop icon, since this is a Photoshop tutorial. So I'll drag in this Photoshop PNG file. I'm going to click, hold, and drag while pressing and holding the Shift key to make this icon or logo a little bit smaller. So I'm going to go like that, and then I'm going to accept it. And before I accept it, this is the free transform tool. I can use it or select it by going to free transform right here, or pressing the keyboard shortcut Control T or Command T. There's also a few other transformation tools right here, but free transform is very common to use in Photoshop, and I think I'll just keep it here. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I think I'll move it actually a little bit more. And I want to get creative with this logo, so I'm going to change the hue of this logo. So I'm going to click on the hue saturation layer again, or adjustment layer. I'm going to click on it, and now you can see it's above the Photoshop logo. So I'm just going to double click and rename this to PS hue for Photoshop hue. And then I'm going to change the hue, and let me show the Photoshop logo here. I'm going to change the hue, let's say, to this purple color. So it changed the purple color of the logo, but it changed the entire image as well, the hue, which we don't want. So what I can do is I can move my mouse over to this layer, and between this top layer of the Photoshop hue and the PNG logo layer, I can press and hold the Option or Alt key, and then you can see this arrow that's pointing down, and then I'm going to click right in between the two layers. And what this does is it only applies this hue layer to the layer below. So take a look at that now. So now that looks a lot better. And what we can also do with this Photoshop layer is make it stick out a little bit more. So I'm going to double click on this layer right outside of it right here, and it opens up this layer style. And I don't want to get too much into these graphics or designs that you can apply, or these effects that you can apply to a layer, but I'm going to apply our outer glow. I'm going to show you the outer glow. It's showing as white here. And actually, I made a mistake. I'm going to click on cancel because I clicked on the hue saturation layer. I should have double clicked on the logo layer. So I'm going to double click there. And now I'm going to click on outer glow. And now you can see the adjustment here. So it's applying this outer glow, and I can change the opacity. I can change the color here. And then I can change the spread and the size, something like that. And I think I'll just keep it like that for now. And that looks good. So now you can see this effects icon right here and the effects right here. So I can uncheck the effects here to hide the outer glow. I can just click on outer glow as well. When I have multiple effects, then I can turn them all off by just clicking on the effects icon. And let me demonstrate that to you by just double clicking here. And I'll also put a drop shadow, a white drop shadow. So now I can hide the drop shadow just like that, or I can hide the outer glow, or I can hide all of the effects just like that. So this is just a small taste into how layers work and how you can start targeting specific adjustment layers to specific image layers or photo layers. Keep in mind, these effects that I applied, usually they're more common with graphic design or like this logo here, or you can apply it to text. As we saw earlier, we know how to add a text layer by clicking on the T icon here, and then we can do some cool graphic design or text adjustment effects. It's really useful when we're doing like YouTube thumbnails or posters, but we'll try to keep and focus on photography for this Photoshop tutorial. We'll now take a look at masking in Photoshop. With this photo I took in Peru, the first thing I'm going to do is add some hue or saturation actually. So let me increase the saturation just like that. And I think that looks good for now. The next thing I want to do is I want to brighten up the center of the image, only the center. It looks like due to the lens I was using, there's already some lens vignetting going on in the corners. So it looks a little bit dark, but that's fine. That'll serve our purpose. But I do want to brighten up the image in the middle to put a little bit of focus on it. And this landscape's pretty wide. If you haven't noticed, there's like 2 people right there walking. There could be more people in the photo, but that's fine. So I'm going to go to the brightness / contrast adjustment here, and I'm going to increase the brightness, let's say to about 35 for now. And right now this adjustment is being applied to the entire photo, and I only want to apply it to the middle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start masking this photo or masking this layer. And right now the layer or the masking layer is white. If I option or alt click on it, you can see it's white. That means any adjustment I make with the adjustment layer, the brightness layer, it's going to be applied to the entire image. So what I'm going to first do is, while I have this layer mask selected or clicked on, I'm going to press Ctrl or Command I to inverse the layer. So now this layer is black, and any adjustments that I make in this adjustment layer won't be applied because the entire layer is black. There's a saying in masking that white reveals and black conceals. I sometimes forget or mix up the order, but that's fine. So what I need to do is I need to start painting this mask white. So right now I have my default colors of white and black already set up. If you press the keyboard shortcut D, it'll automatically set the colors to white and black. And if you want to reverse the colors or exchange it or change it, you can press the keyboard shortcut X. Now I'm cycling through black and white, but I want to keep it at white because I want to paint this mask white. And now I need to select the brush tool, which is right here, the keyboard shortcut B. So I have the brush tool selected. And similar to many of the pointer or other types of selection tools or brush tools, you can change the size and the hardness. I'm going to keep the hardness at 0 because I want a soft edge. And as I mentioned before, you can increase or decrease the size of the brush by pressing left or right square bracket. So I think I'm going to keep it like this. And for now, I'm just going to click in the center while I have this mask selected. I'm going to click in the center once. So now it got a little bit brighter. I'll have the opacity at 100%. So that means the mask is being applied, or the adjustment layer is being applied at 100%. So opacity is the same thing as transparency. And let me show you the mask right now. So this is what it looks like. And I can still continue to paint a little bit like this to get a little bit more of the center, or more around the center, I should say. And now this is how the center looks, or the brightness looks. So let's see the before and after. Before and after. So as you can see, it looks a lot better with a little bit of masking and focusing in on the middle. I can also deactivate this mask by shift clicking on it. So now you can see this X icon or X cross right here. By shift clicking on it, you can activate and deactivate the mask. If I double click on this mask, I can get into some advanced features or tools of the mask. So right now, these are some advanced features or tools right here. And let me show the mask transparency. And I don't like this preset, so I want to go to black and white, black on white. So this is what the mask looks like. And then I can change the feather of the mask if I want. I can shift the edge towards the middle. So these are different tools you will need to play with. I can do a whole course just on this masking option, but I recommend playing with it. And I'm just going to click on OK. And this is what it looks like. So without the mask and with the mask. So that's just the basic principles of masking in Photoshop. It can get a little bit more complicated or sophisticated with other selection tools, such as the marquee tools right here, the rectangular and elliptical tool. And then there's also, let's say, for example, this AI object selection tool. So for example, I can just click on here. And now it's selecting this area. You can see the dotted lines around the foreground here. And then I can click on, let's say, hue saturation, and it automatically created an adjustment layer of the hue saturation with this mask. And if I go to hue saturation, I can just adjust it like this. So this looks a little bit funky. Let me go to the selection tool, or the move tool, I should say. And to show you what's happening here. So this is the hue adjustment layer that I adjusted, and it was applied with this mask. Of course, you wouldn't do this when you're really editing, but this is just to exaggerate and show you the many advanced type of features or type of selection and masking you can do with Photoshop. We'll now take a look at blend modes in Photoshop. What I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this layer, and I'm going to rename it blend layer. And now, as you can see, when I uncheck this or click the eye icon, nothing really happens because they're the same two layers. But the blend modes are right here. Right now I'm on the normal blend mode, and blend modes work by comparing the top layer pixel compared to the below layer pixel. And I can't cover everything on what type of different blend modes there are, but these are the darken blend modes. These are the lighten or brighten blend modes. These are the contrast blend modes. And then we have a few more difference than the hue saturation and so forth. The main blend modes that I like for photography is usually the overlay, soft light, and hard light. These give interesting contrast looks. I do use other ones depending on the type of photo, but most of these blend modes are usually used in graphic design in my opinion. But let me just stick with, let's say, this overlay blend mode. So I'm on this overlay blend mode. Let me hide it and then show it. Hide it and then show it. So you can see the overlay blend mode is a contrast blend mode. There's a lot more contrast. It is a little bit overcooked. So what we can do is decrease the opacity of the blend layer, let's say to 50%. Now that looks a lot better. If I increase it to 100, that's what it looks like. And then if I increase it to 50, that's what it looks like. And of course, I can also put it back to 100, and then I can create a mask. I'm going to inverse this mask, and I'm going to make sure I'm on white. I'm going to select the brush tool, and then I'm just going to change the opacity to around 50% and the flow to about 50%. The flow is the rate of the brush strokes. So I'm just going to start painting like this and like this. So that looks interesting. You can see there's more contrast or focus in the middle, and then there's less focus here. And let me show you the mask that I created. And I'm going to actually double click on this mask because there's too much white here. So I'm going to shift the edge to about like that. I'm going to increase the feather to about that. And I'm going to change this to 100 and 100 and just click on this once. And let's take a look at this mask. That looks good. And I'm actually going to shift the edge a little bit more to about that. Okay, so that looks pretty interesting. The other thing I can do is I want to brighten this area up. So I'm going to go to the curves tool. I'm going to brighten the midtones a little bit like that. And then I can copy this same mask and move it into the curves mask. So I can press and hold the Option or Alt key while I click on the mask and then drag it to the top. And there you go. So I have the same mask for the curves layer and the blend layer. And I can hide this curves layer. I can also play around with the blend modes of the curve layer. This looks pretty interesting. The color dodge, the linear dodge. And with the linear dodge, I can decrease maybe the opacity a little bit. And that looks good. Actually, I'll keep it at around 41. So with these two blend layers, this photo looks a lot better. I'll show you the before and after. Before and after. And one way to deactivate the other layers and only activate one layer is by Option or Alt clicking on the eye icon. So this is the eye icon. So when I click on this eye icon, it deactivates the two top layers and just keeps this background layer that I'm clicking on with the eye icon and pressing the Alt or Option key. And that's the basics of blend modes in Photoshop. We're now going to work with a filter. Filters are up here in the menu section, and they allow you to add special effects to your photo. You can also go back into Camera Raw and edit your photo in Camera Raw like you would in Lightroom or any other photography software if you like. We also have the sharpening right here. We also have noise reduction. We can also add noise. And if you have other photography software installed on your computer that work as a plugin with Photoshop, they'll be available here. So these plugins, I can open them up in their respective app, edit it, and then get it re-imported into Photoshop. But for this photo, I'm going to work with the Gaussian blur just to add a slight glow effect to this photo. So I'm going to click on this layer, press Ctrl J or Command J to duplicate it. I'm going to rename it Blur, just like that. I'm going to go to Filter. I'm going to go to Blur, and Gaussian blur is pretty popular, so I'm going to click on that. And this is the preview. Let me just click here and zoom out a little bit. So now I can change the radius of the blur. And let's say I'll just keep it at 37. I can also uncheck this preview and not see the preview, but I'll just keep it checked. So this is pretty straightforward. I'm blurring it by a radius of 37 or the range by 37 pixels. I'll click on OK. So this is the before or bottom layer, and this is the Gaussian blur layer. Obviously this doesn't look good right now, but what I'm going to do is add a slight glow effect by changing the blend mode to, let's say, linear dodge. I think linear dodge doesn't look good. Let me see, linear or lighter color. I think what I'm going to do is keep it at linear dodge, but I'm going to decrease it to about 46, the opacity. So I'm just clicking, holding and dragging on this opacity icon or text here. I can also click on this drop down and change the slider like that. So I'll just keep it at 51 for now. So let's see the before and after. Before and after. So using the Gaussian blur filter and then changing the blend mode to linear dodge and changing the opacity to about 51, I was able to add a subtle glow effect to this photo. We're going to take a look at smart objects and filters now. I'm going to go to my Mac Finder and bring in this Photoshop logo. I'll just press enter to accept this size. If I look at this Photoshop logo layer, we can see this icon right here. It's the smart object icon. And let me demonstrate first visually what a smart object does. So I'm going to press Ctrl T or Command plus T and then shift hold click and drag this to keep its same aspect ratio and make it smaller. So I'm going to make this logo really tiny, and actually I can't even move it now. Let me move it to the center now, make it really tiny, and it's super tiny now. You may not be able to see it. So I changed it to a very small size, maybe like 30 by 30 pixels. While I still have this layer selected, I'm going to press Command or Control T again, and then I'm going to resize it and make it bigger and just press enter. You can still see this logo retains its sharpness or the same amount of pixels pretty much, and it doesn't lose resolution. I'm going to demonstrate a different way now. I'm going to go to layer and I'm going to rasterize this layer, or I'm going to rasterize this smart object. So it's going to get pixelated, or it's not going to retain its original information. By the way, if you want to change a layer to a smart object, you can go to smart objects and convert to smart objects. But I'm going to rasterize this smart object, and now you can see the smart object icon is gone. So I'm going to press Ctrl or Command T, and I'm going to minimize the size and then move it to the center and minimize the size. Press enter. Let me just zoom in here. So that's how it looks. And now I'm going to press Command or Control T again, and I'm going to make it bigger. And now you can see while I'm making it bigger, the Photoshop logo is pixelated. So what a smart object does is it retains the original picture or layer or file information. Remember when I was going over Camera Raw and I was mentioning that Photoshop isn't a raw renderer or raw processor, rather it's a pixel based or raster based editor. And this is one of the reasons it doesn't do very well with pixels unless you turn it into a smart object. Keep in mind, when you're working with a lot of smart objects or filters, the file size gets bigger and Photoshop becomes more CPU or GPU intensive. So this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to press Ctrl or Command Z a few times until I get the smart object icon again. So right now this layer is a smart object. One other thing I can do is I can double click on this, and it opens up the logo in its own document file right here. And what I can do is I can go to image, I can go to adjustments, I can go to hue, and then I can change the saturation, or the hue I should say. I'll click OK. I'll save it by pressing Ctrl S or Command S. And once I go back here, now you can see it's been changed. So that's another way smart objects work. You can open up each object in its own document file. I'm going to press Ctrl Z and save this and then close it. Another good thing about smart objects is that it works or acts like a smart filter. So if I go to filter You can see this convert to smart filters is deactivated or grayed out. That's because it's already a smart object or it's working as a smart filter. And the way smart filters works is that you can change a filter's value or settings later on. So let's say I go to stylize and I go to oil paint, and then I just make some weird settings to this. Now you can see the oil painting is like this. I can click OK. And now I can deactivate the smart filter or the oil paint just like that. Or I can go back to the filter, add a Gaussian blur. By the way, these options right here, these are the last options that I used if you want to reuse the same adjustment settings or filter settings. So I'll just click on Gaussian blur. And now you can see the Gaussian blur is just like that. I can deactivate the Gaussian blur, or I can deactivate the oil point. Notice while I'm deactivating this, it does take a little bit longer. So these smart filters and objects, they are CPU or GPU intensive, and I can just deactivate the entire smart filters. So smart objects and filters allow you to make edits or make an image re-editable without losing detail or image quality or resolution. So that's how smart filters and objects work. So that wraps up our Photoshop tutorial. Remember that Photoshop is very extensive and it has many tools. So you need to make sure you practice and play around with some of the tools to get the most out of Photoshop. And don't worry about if you don't remember everything that you learned in this tutorial. There's just too much to learn. As time goes by, you're going to prefer certain tools or workflows over others while you're editing in Photoshop. The raw photos are also available to download on my website, so make sure to check the description. And if you enjoyed this video, you know what to do. Subscribe and like. And as always, live easy, sleep breezy, and stay lovely.